Well, good evening once again. I am Reverend Sherry L. Jackson, based in Alexandria, Louisiana. And this is our 11th week of studying the Old Testament in the book of Genesis. Tonight, our lesson will focus on Jacob and Esau, confrontation and reconciliation. As you know, Jacob and Esau were twins, and they had a little clash early on, and with the stealing of the birthright, with the deceitfulness and the dysfunction in this family, that God has chosen to be the people who will ultimately bring in Jesus. And so what I've asked Pastor Green to do is to go over the story of Jacob wrestling with God, that story that we hear about, and Jacob wrestled with God. He does such a good job in going over stories. I kind of lean toward the academic, and he can just bring those stories real practical. So I've asked him to do that, and then after that we will focus in on Genesis 33 and the bringing back together of Jacob and Esau. Pastor Green, are you ready?
Always ready. Thank God for being present. Now, I don't know how to take that. I focus on the academic and he. That's interesting. I'm gonna listen to that he. Let's deal with these two brothers. It's interesting enough how this story all begins to unfold, and then how the death threat shows up. This was a regular family, as most of ours, with some dysfunctionality. When Isaac prayed for his wife Rebecca that she might conceive, they'd been married 20 years, and no baby showed up. There were no fertility clinics around, so he asked God to lift the curse that his wife may conceive, and sure enough, she did. After 20 years, when he was 60 years old, she was pregnant with twins, and the struggle in her carrying those boys was so difficult until she asked God what's going on with this within her, and God just said to her, within you there are two nations that will be born without any works of any kind. God said, the younger will rule over the older. Now, the custom of the day was the firstborn get what is called the birthright portion, that he become the minister or priest of the family, the person who maintained the family property, take care of their mother should the mother outlive the father. He become the go-to to maintain the family. And if he had no children, then the next would have to hopefully have children by his wife or wives, whatever the case may be. In this case, the role is reversed, that Jacob is said by God that the younger will rule over the older. And as they grew up, and Isaac was sick, and not all sickness is unto death, but he thought his was. And so he called Esau to him and said to Esau he wanted him to go hunting, kill deer, and cook the stew. Now, deer stew is awful good. It is really good. And bring him the stew that he normally made. He would eat, bless Esau with a birthright blessing. Now, keep in mind, one day when Esau come in from a hunting trip and was extremely hungry, and Jacob was cooking, and you could smell that stew all through the house. And he asked for some part of it. They call him Edom. And he said to Jacob, give me some of your stew. And Jacob said, if you sell me your birthright, yes. Esau said about his birthright, what good is a birthright if I'm dead, if I starve to death? So technically, he made a deal for a bowl of stew to sell the birthright. But sure enough, when Isaac was sick and older, sight was real bad, and Rebekah heard him say to Esau, go hunting, bring me some stew, I will bless you. And she was so, I guess my word would be deceitful. Jacob's very name meant trickster, deceitful, he'll bet you, supplanter. All of those descriptions of who he was and his character was there. Now here come his mom said, I heard your father tell your brother he was going to bless him. I want you to go in the pen, kill 2 young goats, dress them out, bring them to me. We're going to cook, save the hide. I'm going to use that hide to cover your skin. Jacob asked his mom, man, I'm smooth. My brother is hairy. Dad will know the difference. She said, whatever the curse is, let it be on me. So he killed the goats. She made the stew. While she cooking the stew, she put the hide on his hand, his neck, and dressed him and covered him she covered him so well until she put Esau's clothes on him. Isaac actually thought it was Esau. He said, your voice sound like Jacob, but you smell like Esau, you feel like Esau. He ate and he blessed him. No sooner than he had blessed Jacob with the birthright portion, Esau comes in with the stew and tells his father, I brought the stew, we're ready. And then he says, but who is it that I bless? He said, do you have another blessing? He said, but I've blessed him with the birthright blessing. I've blessed him to say, and I've prayed for him, that he will rule over his brothers. He will be the one to carry the family name, the property, and whatever else the family had. Jacob had received that blessing from his father Isaac. Esau was so hurt, he asked his father, well, do you have another blessing? Could you at least bless me with another blessing? And so he prayed for him that he would be able to reverse the yoke of that his brother had on him. So he gave Esau a way out, but he also told him, you will be a man of the woods, you will live in the country, you will live in the wild, you will serve your brother, but you will be strong. And so when Rebekah heard what was going on, and word got to her that Esau was going to kill Jacob the day that his daddy died, she said, why should I lose both my boys the same day? And so she sent Jacob to her brother's house, the late one, up at Padan Aram, about 600 miles, between 500 and 600 miles away. Young fella leaving home, knapsack, everything he has on his back, a guilty conscience, headed nearly 600 miles to find his uncle. No GPS system, no van, no SUV, no superhighway, no state police, no highway patrol, just he and the elements and whatever was out there. And during that day, only the strong survive, including wild animals. And so he's on this journey. He makes the journey. He finds his uncle. His uncle, his mother's brother, was as tricky as she was. Worked him, they worked, and 7 years for one wife. He gave him a wife and maid, another 7 for a sister, 6 years for cattle. And then the word of God's come to him to go back home. Now, here it is. He left home with a death threat. And God is saying, go back. And as he journeyed toward home, his father-in-law catch up with him after a 3-day journey. They prayed. They set up this benediction that some churches say, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we have someone from another at Mespah. They set it up even though they crossed it. Then he's getting closer to his brother. He sent a committee out with livestock of all kinds. When you read the details how he divided up his herd, his flock, his wife, his children, their maids, their children, kept reaching the back with Joseph for him. But he sent them out at intervals. So when Esau saw it, it's like a caravan coming. All of this wealth. And he said to them, tell Esau, your servant Jacob is coming. Tell Esau. Everything was your servant Jacob. And so as would be the night before he finally meet his brother, he's at Jabal. He put everybody on one side of the creek. He crossed the other side. And that night, as he wrestled with himself, he wrestled with himself as a man would wrestle with God. Come. The sun's coming up. The angel said to him, let me go. He said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? And he gave Jacob the name. He gave Jacob the name Israel, as a man wrestled with man and God and prevail. And so he touched the thigh, the muscle on the thigh of his hip, and he come up lame. So the cripple Israel was better than the straight walking Jacob. Then when he comes back, Esau shows up. And instead of Esau being angry and still carrying a grudge, Esau runs, he meet him, they hug, they kiss, much like the prodigal son and his father. And Esau had so much, he didn't want nothing from his brother. But since God had been good to both of them, after Jacob kept saying, please accept it, he accepted the gift. He allowed his men to protect Jacob as they moved back toward Bethel. And so the joy of this piece is, here we have the brothers who come together again, not with a death threat, but how they made up and how they cried, well, prayed. And so the end of the story between the two brothers was very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for telling the story to bring us up to date. And with that said, we're going to start right there with Genesis 33:1. At this time, as Pastor Green has said, that it has been about 21 years since Jacob and Esau has had a face-to-face. And now at the age of 40, Jacob is about 40 years old when he leaves home to save his life after the trickery had taken place. And Esau actually hated Jacob and said that he really wanted his brother dead. Now, just think about, even to this day in our families, there are some feuds, there are some situations that we are still holding on to, passed down from one generation to the other on something that happened years and years and years ago. And so this is what we find with the story of Jacob and Esau. But remember, this is a piece in the grand story. The grand story is that Abraham is going to be the father of many nations. And so it's almost like Jacob and Esau have to get it straight in order for God's promises to Abraham to come to fruition. Now, I'll be the first to say that it's not an easy thing to get back together to try to reconcile, but even though they're going to have some bumps and bruises in getting back together, they will eventually do it. So in the meantime, Jacob had become very rich. Now remember, with the birthright, you get the blessing, you get the property, you get everything passed down to you. So he had become a very rich man. By this time, he had 2 wives and 2 handmaids. He has 11 sons, 2 daughters, and he has many more servants. So he was not hurting. The confrontation is going to take place. Like I said, it has to take place. And as we see here, it might take 21 years or 21 days. But sooner or later, we must face our own Esau, the person who that there has been a feud between us, whether it's parents, siblings, friends, neighbors, the Hatfields and McCoys. Sooner or later, we're going to have to face each other, and we end up facing each other. The question becomes, what do we do when we have the encounter? So as we talked about earlier, Jacob was and Esau were twins. They were mirror images. So just think about twins when they, and if they were identical twins, when they looked at each other, they saw themselves. So, you know, we have this thing in the chaplaincy department that we are more alike than different. We might have different situations, but if we really strip back and get to the core, we are more alike than different. And so the way that we can work with each other is to find out, is to come to grips that, you know, your struggle may be A, B, and C, and mine might be C, D, and E, but at the end of the day, we are both struggling. So from the womb, the two struggled. Remember in the beginning when the mother, Rebecca, was having these problems, and, you know, while being pregnancy, she had a hard pregnancy. She cried out, wanted to know, what is this? You know, why is this pregnancy so hard? And so God says, because you have two nations inside of you and they are struggling. And so from that time, they have struggled ever since. So, and as we talked about before, Esau was an outdoorsman. Isaac loved Esau. Jacob was a homeboy. Rebecca loved Jacob. Esau was stronger physically, but Jacob was stronger mentally. They both had their strengths, except they came in different ways. So Esau was the consequence of Jacob's character. Jacob stealing the blessing caused Esau's hatred and desire to kill him. Just think about what was at stake. You know, we said, well, why was he so why did he hate him so? The birthright, remember, was the blessing of the father. It was the property that was passed down. It was the inheritance. It was the name. It was everything. And so just think about perhaps something throughout your life that's been taken from you, or you think somebody manipulated you or done you wrong. Just think about it, even in our own families, where one thinks that the other has an up on them. We carry that. We carry that. And so Jacob, Esau was mad. Pastor Green, I see you trying to get in.
Well, let me help if I can. Not only was he hurt, this might help us some. I deal with a lot of families in the work I do, and you'd be surprised how little money or little insurance or little perceived wealth cause family rifts now. It may not be very much, but if a family member die and one person is beneficiary or birthright person, it doesn't take much for a family to fall out and be angry for a long time. Where in this case, it was the wealth, all the wealth of the family, and that Esau will get a double portion of that wealth. Let's say, for instance, if Isaac had $3 million, Esau would get $2 million and Jacob would get $1 million. That was the birthright. So now the prayer and the switch is Jacob get $2 million, Esau get $1 million. And readily we can see how that would cause a rift. Nowadays, well, then it was even more powerful because the cattle, the land, the servants, the slaves, it all was a part of what stayed with the land. And therefore, Jacob had tricked him out of it with the help of his mom, even though there was no reason to do it, because God had already said the older will serve the younger. Not because of any works, but on the process of election, because God's divine will was that this is the way it's going to be. And that's the way it was. So with that in the back of Jacob's mind, and as you put it, 20 years out. He'd been gone 20 years. His mother had died. He didn't get to go to his mother's funeral. And now brother is coming with 400 soldiers, 400 armed men in front of him. And the last thing I heard was, I'm going to kill you. That was the last thing he left home with. And now his brother is coming. So we can readily see how he needed to be in prayer that night at Jabal. He needed to be ready. He should read, when we read his prayer, how he reminded God that you told me to come back to Bethlehem. You told me to come back. And I'm going back at your word. I'm going back because I expect you to protect me, provide for me, and my brother will accept me. And this is a powerful prayer that he's praying. And sure enough, as you said earlier, this was a powerful experience, coming back with his boys, his wife, his daughter, and their wives' personal maids that we call surrogate mothers. It's all playing out, and everything is on the table now for these two brothers to meet. What would be the meaning if one of us who are listening tonight had left home with such a threat, and now we're headed back home? How will we reconcile the difference with family? Thank you.
Okay, as we thank you, look at verse 33, chapter 33 of Genesis, verses 1 and 2. Jacob looked up and there was Esau. Esau is coming with 400 men. And so he divided, Jacob did, the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two female servants. Now, just think that this had to be a difficult thing for Jacob to see, his brother coming. Now, he had to have been scared. He had to have feared for his life. And the reason why I know he was scared is because the way he lined up those who would meet him first. And you would see this in chapter 2, not chapter 2, verse 2. He divided the children of Leah first. And remember, we didn't get in this in our study, but remember that he went originally for Rachel, but the daddy made him work to get 7 years, thinking he was going to get Rachel, but he ended up getting Leah. And so he had to go work another 7 years to get Rachel. But he has Leah, and he has children by Leah, and he put Leah first. And so no matter how Jacob may have wanted to push this aside, seeing Esau face to face was a real thing. He had to deal with it. And any kind of self-help or 12-step program like AA, NA, whatever kind of A, the first thing they tell you is that you've got to admit that there is a problem. And so being face to face with Esau, Jacob was going to have to deal with it. He was going to have to deal with the consequences. It was not a figment of his imagination. It was not a vision. He saw him for real. So let's just think about some things, and I'm just hoping that someone would jump in, not be afraid. We've been together for about 10 weeks now, so as we are discussing some things to think about, what are some things people try to run away from and things people try to avoid? With somebody, there's no right or wrong, because there are many things that we try to run away from.
Well, Reverend Jackson, think about it this way too, if we would, for a moment. Jacob's father-in-law was also his uncle, his mother's brother. And his mother's brother, Rebecca's brother, had as many tricks as Rebecca had. And, you know, it was a tricky family. She had tricked her son, Esau. Jacob now is the birthright son. He goes to 600 miles to her brother. And according to the scripture, Rachel was beautiful. And he met Rachel first. He negotiated the deal of working for 7 years for Rachel. But his uncle, on the night they had the wedding ceremony, they wear veils in the Middle East. The Eastern tradition is the female is veiled. Now, apparently those sisters was about the same size. And so instead of the father allowing the veil to be on Rachel, as Laban marched Rachel to Jacob's tent for their wedding to be consummated, instead of bringing Rachel, the one he agreed and worked 7 years for, he pulled a switch, he put Leah. And then in the morning when he wake up and see who he's married to, Jacob said, that was not the deal. And guess what Laban said? In my house, the younger does not marry before the older. But if you still want to marry Rachel, you can work for me 7 more years. Now, isn't that interesting? 14 years he worked for those 2 wives and their maids. And then his Uncle Laban made a big mistake. You don't trick a trickster too long. He said, you have 2 wives, you have family, you need some cattle, you need some goats, you need some sheep. And he agreed to work 6 years for livestock. And that's where Jacob tricked him out all of his healthy, strong cattle. And when their brothers realized Jacob had stole just about everything, they said, we got to get rid of this guy, or we won't have nothing. He get the land next. And he makes off, but then again, you're right, he has to go face his brother. Stay as long as you want, run where you can, but sooner or later, reckoning day will come. And so having to go face his brother was his challenge, and that's what we've stuck with tonight, is how he have to manage and get over his fear, his anxiety, his stressfulness, and how did he do it to go back home to Bethel, and how he deal with this Taliban-sized army of 400 armed guards that Laban is coming with, and what's going on through his mind. And so you're absolutely right. As he put Leah and her 2 maids and all the children first, he kept Rachel and Joseph across the creek with him. And his plan was, if Esau is still angry and kill them, some of us will get away. But he got by, but he didn't get away. Thank God that God's plan is still at work in spite of his plan.
Thank you, Pastor Green. So as we think about this, what are some of the ways that, you know, we try to, or some things people try to run away from? Is there anybody want to share?
Yeah, like your past. That's something that people try to run away from, their past. And then they try to avoid, sometimes they try to avoid people who know them from their past.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, a secret. They don't want that to come out in the wash, as they say. So they try to avoid that altogether.
Okay, their past. Okay, anybody else? Certainly our past is one thing. Many of the patients that I work with, we, you know, as you talk to them, it may manifest itself in many ways, and it may be hidden in it, as we say, with defense mechanisms. But at the end of the day, if you keep talking to them and peeling away and peeling away and peeling away, they will eventually get back to something that happened years and years and years ago. And they end up trying to get rid of it with by self-medicating through alcohol, through drugs, through, sex, whatever it is, but is trying to get away from. Jacob had run away from a brother who was mad. And as this story unfolds, we're going to see how Jacob had to humble himself to reestablish relationships, because at the end of the day, he had done wrong. So let's look at Jacob's plan to minimize the risk. He was scared, so he figured that if Esau was going to come and get somebody, he would be the last person at the end of the list. He says that Jacob sent his messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." He sent the servants to kind of like scope him out to see what his countenance was, how he was acting, perhaps so Jacob could get prepared for his brother to come. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and the herds and the camel as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. So let's assess the situation. Why do you think Jacob was fearful? Why do you think that Jacob was fearful? I ask anyone to chime in. Why do you?
For one reason, because he had stolen his brother's birthright. That would be, probably the number one thing that I would think that would make him fearful. And because after doing so, he told him that he was going to kill him.
Okay. Yeah, he had already said that. Okay. Anybody else?
His faith wasn't as strong as I guess it should have been in God. Because he had prayed, but he still was afraid.
He still was afraid. Certainly. All of that's correct. Anybody else? Certainly, as you have said, he was fearful for all of those reasons. Esau said if he see him again, he was going to take him out. Jacob knew what he had done, and after praying, he still was not sure how Esau was going to take sin.
I think his conscience was bothering him as well, because he knew what he had done, but I don't think he was ready to face the consequences of what he had done.
It's almost like he knew he had to do it.
Exactly.
He didn't know if Esau was going to accept it. He didn't know if Esau was going to reject him. Even though he had done wrong, he still wasn't sure of what the outcome was going to be. And so what was his strategy? His strategy was to put one group ahead of him, and he put Leah's group, Leah's children and servants first. The animals, Leah's children and servants, because if Esau gets somebody, Jacob's prized possession, so to speak, would still be intact. It was almost like, okay, well, if we see him getting the first group, then we will have an opportunity to get away. He's still trying to be a strategic thinker. He's still trying to outsmart, but you got to realize they were twins. They were mirror images of each other. So Esau had just as much deceit and trickery in him as Jacob did. because they were cut from the same cloth. Now, here's another question as we think about this situation. How could pride affect one's ability to accurately assess a difficult situation like this? Pride. How could pride assess a difficult situation like this?
Well, Jacob could have said, you know, when the Lord had told him that he had to go back, he could have been so prideful that he just said, well, I ain't going back there. He ain't killing me. I'm going to do my own thing. We're going to stay right on over here.
Mm-hmm. How often has pride gotten, in the way? And I got both of my hands up.
Woo.
Both of my hands up, because pride,
Something else.
yeah, it's something else. It's something else. Anybody else want to talk about how pride could affect one's ability to accurately assess a difficult situation like this one that Jacob finds himself in?
Well, sometimes I think that it could prevent you from fostering the relationships again. When someone has hurt you and done you wrong, then your pride won't allow you to let them back in to make things right.
Certainly. And the opposite of pride is humility. And so,
Sherry?
yes, I'm sorry, LaTanya.
Oh, I just want to speak to something that Gloria just talked about and touched on. Well, everybody's been talking about, but pride, I can say how I allowed pride to get the best of me at the wrong time, because me being prideful of not fostering relationships with people who I think don't want to foster them with me, I allowed pride to get in the way of me ever speaking to my father again. I remember when he gave me away at my wedding 21 years ago, and I vowed to never speak to him again. But maybe 10 years later, I said, well, I hope that the next time I see him is not in his casket. And guess when the next time was I saw him? It was in his casket. I was the only one who never reached out to say anything to him. When he was on his deathbed dying, and everyone was calling for me to come there, he was waiting to see LaTanya. LaTanya wouldn't go. I simply just would not go, because I said that, here you left my mother to raise me all of my life, and now you want a relationship when I'm older. I should have been a better person, and I should not have allowed pride to step in the way, but I did. And unfortunately, the next time I saw him was in his casket. And that is for me to own up to, that I could have done. I am a Christian, and I could have chosen to do better, and I didn't. So I just wanted to say that is definitely a time when I allowed pride to get in my way.
Thank you for sharing that, LaTanya. I know that was a difficult time for you, and you are certainly right. We each have to face our Esau's, and yeah, thank you for opening up with that, because I'm quite sure that whether we say it or not, we've all been in that situation one way or the other. Does anyone else want to share on that? Okay. So let's look at the prayer, as we talked about, the prayer that Jacob prayed. What was let's look at the specific request that he made. And this would be, we have to go back in 32, 9 through 12. He says, then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, Go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. With what, as you look at his prayer, what words or phrases do you see his humility in his prayer that he just prayed? Do you see any humility in the prayer that he just prayed in Genesis 32 through 9 through 12?
Yeah, he clearly states that he was unworthy
Yes.
of all the kindness and faithfulness that God had shown him.
Mm-hmm.
That was one area that was specific for his humility. And then he also said that where he was talking about where he said he was afraid that he will attack him. So that was another sign of his humility, that there was fear there.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, those are where I see the humility. But in the last verse, he said he went back to what God had said. But you said that he will make you prosper and will make your descendants, like he said, like the sand of the sea. So in two spots he was humble in what he was saying. The one where he was saying he was unworthy of the kindness and faithfulness that God had shown him in spite of who he was. And the other one was when he said that he was afraid of his brother, and so he was showing his humility there, that he needed God to help him because he knew that he had no idea what would happen.
Certainly. And
so I would say when he asked him to save him, and he was saying, "Save me from my brother."
mm-hmm. And the fact that he when we pray, it is a form of humility, because what you're saying when you pray is that within yourself you can't do it, and you need something or someone out of yourself or beyond yourself to make this work. And so prayer is a form of humility. And so the next question becomes, why do you think Jacob repeated God's promises? I believe the reason why he repeated the promises is that he was saying, okay, God, I'm giving this thing back to you. And also remember, he prayed, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, you have been the God of this family. You made a promise to this family, and so you're going to have to do it. So it was a humbling thing, but it also was a form of empowerment, because until we cannot become empowered unless we become humble to say, I don't have it all. I don't have everything within myself. I need something out beyond me. And so when we do that, then God is able to then give you what you need to get the job done. Humble yourself before others. Now, we've talked about this line of what is significant about the order in which Jacob lined up the people. It seems that he was putting the less important ones, so to speak, in front of to get the line of fire first, before before they got to him. Now I'm going to take a chance, and I do see my pastor online, and ask him if he would chime in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Actually, I was just listening and still trying to learn the system. Thank you. In the thought of humility, in that vein,
You got it.
I got it.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Ask me the question again. I'm sorry. I was doing three things.
we were talking about what is significant about the order in which Jacob lined the people up. Was there any significance in that?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know with respect to the people themselves, but the significance in putting them out in front in waves was a way of humbling, if you will, his brother as he came back to him. You know, sometimes we put people in front of us that we think can go before us, that can soften, if you will, the heart of the spirit of the one that we're trying to reach. Okay.
Okay.
And so I see this as he lined them up and as he sent them by waves. And of course, as Esau came out to him to embrace his brother, he saw this wave of family coming back to him. And finally, after getting through wave after wave, he was able to meet and greet his brother, to which he came and fell upon, and of course, and wept. And again, we do that all too often. We send ambassadors and emissaries, and of course, as we might would say, can you go, you know, we ask somebody, look, can you go talk to such and such on my behalf? Okay. And that's part of the significance that we'll see.
Thank you. That is certainly another way to look at that, is that perhaps by the time Esau got to Jacob, his heart would have been, as you said, softened. He would have calmed down. He would have not been in such a rage by the time he got to Jacob. And so it was certainly a strategy of Jacob to do it this way. And I think it worked out for him, because certainly by the time they did meet, it was a different experience. So when they did get to each other, Jacob and Esau's culture dealt with prostration on the ground, which was a sign of a humble approach. When we bow before somebody, especially in that culture, it was about a humbling. You're putting yourself beneath. You're not thinking yourself higher than the other. In our culture, we don't do so much of bowing, but are there other ways that we demonstrate humility when we are dealing with a confrontation? Are there ways that we don't necessarily bow, but when we are dealing with a confrontation or something that could be could escalate or be blown out of in a real bad, are there ways that we could enter in a to show a gesture of humility?
Well, an apology is often what we do when we know we wrong someone. If we are being right about it, we will go to them and try to settle the matter or the issue by acknowledging our wrong and apologizing for the hurt we've caused.
Okay. Anybody else in the form of which ways do we show humility?
Well,
Okay.
where you said what kinds of weapons, and you have that in quotations, and do we pull out, how I'm reading that is weapons and pull out or whatever. For some people, they give things instead of, saying they apologize with their hearts or whatever. They try to buy you things or lure you into that aspect to attempt a reconciliation. It doesn't work for me, but for some people it does.
Yeah, something to soften, as Pastor Jackson said, something to soften the blow, to kind of like get your heart, massage your heart a little bit to get you ready for the full, for the conversation. Let's listen for ways in which each brother was at his best in this situation. 33. These verses 4, 5, 9 through 11. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. It's very important. Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and he kissed him, and they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. Who are these with you? He asked. Jacob answered, they are the children God has graciously given your servant. But Esau said, I'm sorry. I think I must have finished. Okay, 9. But Esau said, I already have plenty, my brother. What do you have for yourself? No, please, said Jacob, if I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. But to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Now that you have received me favorably, please accept the present that was brought to you. For God has been gracious to you, and I have all I need. And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. Let's kind of like take this a little bit step by step, and we got about 5 minutes. What was Esau's action? And God had to be in this, because remember, Esau started out with he was going to take his brother out when he saw him, right? And so, but by the time we see him, this is not the case. So what were Esau's actions based on this scripture? Who moved first?
Esau moved
Moved first.
Esau moved first. Esau moved first. And he embraced him. Okay, Pastor Green, I saw you trying to get in.
Esau had forgiven Jacob long ago. Esau had prayed and forgiven Jacob, but Jacob did not know he had been forgiven. And one of the key thoughts for me in life is we don't know when other people have forgiven us for the wrong we've done. Therefore, sometimes we hold on to a wrong that's long been forgiven. The pain of the past, of Rebecca dying and Jacob not being able to be a part of that experience, and I'm sure in my own mindset that Esau had a change of heart, a change of mind, a change of venue. So when mom died, the one who did the wrong, then why do I need to carry this any further? Since God had said through Isaac to Esau in a prayer, you will be able to remove the yoke or the burden of your brother when you're ready. So when Esau was ready, he allowed the forgiveness of Jacob to come. And for all of us, we can forgive others and never know whether or not they've forgiven us, but Esau was free. And his freedom with his brother was only his freedom. His brother couldn't get free until he forgave the other brother. Jacob couldn't be free until he was forgiven, until he forgave Esau. Esau couldn't be free until he forgiven Jacob. So Esau was free. And his freedom let him go to his brother and embrace him and show love and show kindness because he was free. And eventually Jacob was able to set himself free as well. Good lesson for all of us to forgive, whether we're forgiven or not.
What a powerful, this is a powerful lesson on so many levels. Now Esau embraced Jacob first, but then what was Jacob's action? What was Jacob's response to this?
He cried, so that was humility for Jacob.
Okay, and he also wanted to do what? He had a gift that he wanted to give him
things.
It was almost like this gift was paying a penance. He's gonna give him because again, Jacob was a rich man. He had it all, and so he wanted to give him something, and Esau did not want to accept it, and perhaps that was a form of pride, but he eventually did it. And so the questions become for us that if we were Jacob, how would Esau's actions have humbled us even more? Because Jacob was all tense, his anxiety was high, by right. Esau was mad with him, and almost to the point of hatred. Yet when Esau came to Jacob, he embraced him. And that had to bring Jacob down even more.
Right. I think, I don't know, like just putting myself in the situation the same way like this, it probably would humble me in the sense that I would have been so remorseful and for what I had done to him and really understood per se the error of my ways in such a way that I wouldn't try to make that mistake with anybody else again. Yeah. That particular one.
Yeah. So God had been gracious to both the men, and they said so. And at the same time, God has been good to you also. And we could just talk about all kinds of ways that God has, that you can humbly acknowledge the graciousness to others. So when God has been good to us, then we can extend that same thing to others. And it goes back to the principle of be kind to everyone you see, because you don't know the great burden they are carrying. And so when we understand that we are more alike than different, and if God can extend his grace to us, he can certainly do it to others. And I tell you, working with the veterans and doing this pastoral care has really done something to me of recognizing that as grace is extended to me, then it's just automatic, to want to extend it to others. And so it's all about humility, and at the end of the day, humility always wins because it pleases God. So ask yourself to help God to help you to accurately assess your own attitudes about a need for reconciliation. Consider all God has done to reconcile us with himself, And remember, this grand story from Genesis to Revelation is about God reconciling us back to himself. God's graciousness to us should compel us to pass that blessing on to others. So